Before the video starts, I do want to mention that this video is the second part of a series that's going to be running throughout February, so if you haven't seen the first part, I recommend that you do. A lot of the basics of the challenge were explained in that video, so I'd highly advise watching it. But if not, I'll quickly explain the premise of the challenge. Sonic Frontiers is my favorite Sonic game of all time, but it's way too easy, so to make it as hard as possible, I made the Ultimate Sonic Frontiers challenge, which contains 6 whole rules. 1. You can't die at any point of the game. 2. You can only attempt cyberspace levels once, and if we run out of cyberspace levels and haven't collected all the unlockable Chaos Emeralds, we lose. 3. No fishing. 4th, no major glitches like skipping Chronos Island and using Hyper Bounce. 5th, no upgrading any of our stats. And 6th, we can't intentionally side loop for rings. So without further ado, let's continue where we left off. To start this video off, I want to confess something. The first part of the series was legitimately done. The reason why it was so particularly easy for me is because, well, I've done this challenge before! I said I've done this challenge before. In fact, if you go back to the very beginning of all my posts on Chronos Island, you'll see that it was a post about doing this exact same challenge with these exact same rules. And that obviously means that I've attempted to record this challenge before, multiple times even. But the furthest I've ever gotten to was Chronos Island. And this explains a lot. It explains why recording footage was 40 minutes while this one was 80. And it explains why my plan was so flawless. But one thing it does explain is why I was absolutely destroyed by Ares Island. What I'm about to narrate showed me that this challenge made Sonic Frontiers a lot harder than I could have possibly imagined. We begin around this area, and even though I haven't tried this challenge particularly on Ares Island, I have played enough Sonic Frontiers to know that to begin the story, you need 40 memory tokens, which can be translated to 5 treasures containing 8 memory tokens each. Thankfully though, I know where to get those as well and ended up with an extra vault key from another treasure. This is a huge help because unlike Chronos Island, which requires 20 vault keys to complete with easy cyberspace stages, Ares Island requires 24 vault keys to finish, which have stages which are a lot harder. So finding a vault key from a treasure is extremely lucky for us. Afterwards, we free Knuckles and we are told to collect vault keys from portals. This is where things really start to sink in that we're actually not that safe this time around. In Chronos Island, I knew which cyberspace portals were where, I knew their layouts, and I knew all the locations of the red rings and the like. But here, because we don't have an idea of which cyberspace portals we're putting our portal gear into, it's sort of like gambling, because we can't know until it's too late, and by then, we have to play it, because we'd be wasting our portal gears. But before we can get into the cyberspace portals, we need a portal gear in the first place, and things start to go downhill fast. Because even though I accounted for not going to Hermit Coco and Elder Coco as the main reason for fearing Rule 5, what I didn't realize is that I didn't look at things in a more straightforward way. That being that the lack of being able to upgrade our stats just makes everything in Ares a lot harder to fight. And when I say a lot harder, I mean a whole lot harder. This also makes Guardians a lot harder to fight, which is something I didn't really account for. They have more health and take even more rings from us per hit we take. Thankfully though, Ares is quite generous with boxes containing skill points, and freeing Knuckles gives us the Cyclone Kick, which does good damage, so we take on Strider, who's actually the second easiest Guardian in Ares, but somehow managed to still mess me up. Unfortunately for us, because of how little defense we have, the laser that hit me at the very last second before his weak spot opened one-shot me of all my rings. Thankfully though, with the help of Cyclone Kicks and Stomps, we were able to defeat him before he started his second phase. However, I wouldn't say the fight was really worth it, because we went into the fight with 316 rings and left with 0. And these 46 seconds where I didn't have a single ring had to be one of the most frightening moments I've ever had. I was so frantic that I wasn't even thinking straight, and was constantly putting myself in danger, but thankfully I got some rings and started doing some cyberspace levels. So I started off with 2-1. Already my lack of knowledge was showing. I fell into an area that I shouldn't have in the first place, which didn't jeopardize my 4 missions being completed all that much, but 2-1 is by far the cyberspace level I've played the most, and it's also very forgiving with its S ranks. So I collected my 7 vault keys and collected the blue Chaos Emerald. I went into the Wyvern chase sequence already expecting to lose some rings, but I was hopeful that I could gain some as well, and I actually did. I started off with 60 and ended it off with 87, and with that we entered the open world again. But instead of meeting Knuckles immediately, I took the chance to familiarize myself with Ares Island and explore the area. There's something I want to mention with this exploration segment, the fight with Sumo. Sumo is by far the easiest fight in the entire island, and is one of the bosses we should be able to beat without losing any rings. Never mind. We do manage to beat him quite easily though, and we collect the portal gear. This kept a mental note in my mind that if I need a portal gear, the best option is Sumo. But later on in this episode, I not only deviated from this, but also did it in the worst way possible. But for now, we finish exploring while collecting some memory tokens, getting a portal gear from the ground, and unlocking homing shot. We then finally talk to Knuckles and progress the story. I do want to mention that while I was progressing the story here, I did side loop for rings, but it was accidental, which is where the specific stating of the rule 6 helps me. And so, we move on after talking to Knuckles again, and the game tells us to get some vault keys. This time I had absolutely no idea what cyberspace stage I was going to get, and I ended up with 2-4. I have close to no memory of playing this stage at all, but I somehow managed to actually get all 4 missions done by following the base principle that if the level has an upper route, you take it for all the red rings. Surprisingly, we collect another 7 vault keys and actually unblock both the red and yellow chaos emeralds. And after doing some more hunting for remote memory tokens, we collect the red chaos emerald, do an obliterate terror to collect the green chaos emerald, and collect the yellow chaos emerald. However, this is where things started to take turns for the worse, and this island, while it certainly didn't make me lose a challenge, it did show me how fast things can go horribly wrong, and how this challenge doesn't let up. The decline started where I progressed the story again and did 2 obligatory challenges and entered 2-2. This level was the first level that actually made me experience the full intended difficulty of a cyberspace level with Rule 2 implemented. This level went horribly. I never felt in control with the rotating platforms, the perspective was extremely wacky, and the amount of times I got hit in a row was so bad that by the end of the stage, I didn't even have enough rings to meet the 30 ring requirement. Because we only collected 2 vault keys, I didn't have enough to collect the white chaos emerald. So next I attempted 2-7, and that went even worse. I got stuck in loops, missed the first red star rings, and at the end of the stage, I again got 2 keys. Keep in mind, we've played 2-1, 2-4, 2-2, and 2-7. We only have 3 cyberspace levels left, and if those levels don't get us the white chaos emerald, we instantly lose the challenge. I then needed a portal gear, and instead of taking the mental advice I have saved that Strider and Sumo are the easiest guardians to fight, because I was closer to another guardian, I just decided to fight Crab, by far the worst guardian for me to fight. Here's an easy way to demonstrate why this was a bad idea. Yeah, I barely did any damage, got 1 shot of all my rings, and by the end of it, I was left with 4. With nothing left to do, I attempted 2-6, and just like all the other stages I had played, this went horribly as well. I actually know this level, but I know this level for not knowing it well. It wasn't surprising when I again got 2 vault keys, but it was surprising when I unlocked the white chaos emerald, and that's when it hit me. If I didn't beat 2-1 and 2-4 with all 4 missions complete, then we likely would have failed. 2-1 and 2-4 completely saved us, but even then, things didn't get much better. After I met Knuckles for the last time and confronted Wyvern, I had 155 rings, but that was only because there were rings in the tunnel before Wyvern. But even before I got into the Wyvern fight at all, I got dropped to no rings in 1 hit. Thankfully though, I got 65 from the chase. Since the game sets you at 100 rings if you start with less than 100 rings, we start with 100. But if this were the case, we'd still die, as we don't do nearly enough damage to beat him in that amount of time. Thankfully, Wyvern just so happens to be the only Titan fight that has rings. So we fight Wyvern, and really there's nothing to really point out. We used homing shot, cyclone kick, and a stomp as much as possible. And so after we fed Wyvern some yummy snacks, we cleared Ares Island. This is the second part of the 5 or 4 part series that I plan to run weekly throughout February. So if you want to see more of this, make sure to subscribe for more content and check the description for the next part, which I'll add to the description when it comes out. Have a good day or night wherever you are.